Greetings all. Welcome to another session here of English grammar. Today we're going to be looking at the be verb, or the copula, and we're also going to be looking at subject-verb agreement. Now, a lot of the information that we're going to be looking at today comes from the textbook, the grammar book by Sells-Mercia and Larson Freeman. It is an excellent book. For those of you who are delving into second language teaching, you probably want to get a hold of one of these books just for your reference, if for no other reason. Let's move on and take a look at some of the issues that we're going to look at today. Again, we're going to look at the be verb, or the copula. We'll look at subject-verb agreement, some of the problems that exist in there, and then we'll finish up with a couple rules. Let's begin just by saying this is going to be a problem for a lot of your ESL students. In particular, third-person singular. The S that you add on there is not something that your students are going to get very quickly, especially if you have students whose first language does not include a be verb type of thing. So you should just be prepared ahead of time. This is something that's very marked for most of your students, and they're going to have difficulty with it. They're also going to have some difficulty with separating the different jobs of the be verb. Obviously, it's going to be, again, the copula. It's going to be a verb, a verb of state. For example, the captain is on the bridge, the captain is injured, the captain is a reaver. Here's a preposition, here's an adjective, and then here is a noun. Different ways of using this. Of course, the be verb is also used as an auxiliary when dealing with progressive and perfect aspects, tenses. So we've got a variety of roles here that the be verb is going to be involved in, and again, just because it's the same graphemes that are put together and they have different jobs, it's going to be confusing for your students. Why is the be verb different? And we'll look at some of the meanings and some of the problems that we have with the be verb. So here's the be verb. We've got how many parts to this? Well, we've got 5 listed here, right? Am, are, is, was, and were. We also have just the straight be verb, oftentimes with put into an infinitive. A typical verb only has 3. It has the infinitive, it has the past, and it has a third-person singular. And so right away you see that this verb is just different. It's not the same. Again, it can be followed by a noun. Dawn is a nurse. It can be followed by an adjective. Dawn is pretty. And it can be followed by a prepositional phrase. Dawn is in the car. Okay, so not all verbs can be that way or have the same types of things afterwards. Other verbs have more limitations. Additionally, when you're looking at the be verb and you're making a negative sentence, normally you need do, right? I don't want to go. I don't drive easily. Drive easily? I don't talk easily. I don't play the piano, right? But with the be verb, I don't need a negative. I am not going, right? He is not in the car. Right? It doesn't need a do form. Additionally, when you're doing negative, you typically need a do verb. But for the copulas, you don't need one. And it's just another anomaly. In addition to the standard be verb, which describes a state or a change of state, right? He is sick, he is not here, he is hungry type of thing, describing the state. There are other verbs that can be considered types of copulas because they describe a state. There is no real action going on. He is sick, he appears sick, he seems sick, he looks bad. Okay? In other words, he appears bad, he is bad, as opposed to the actual I look through the window. Different thing, right? He smells bad. Okay? These are all perceptions or states or change of perceptions. I'm sorry, change of states. And these can also be considered copulas. Some of these will be difficult for students because of the state of nature. Okay? When you're dealing with things like look or smell or sound, when they're in action, right? I tasted the ice cream. That's not going to be a copula. But this tastes funny, right? This is funny. That's going to be a different type of verb, and so those are going to be a little more difficult for some of your students. Okay, so just to summarize here, why is it different? It's different because of the rules that are attached to it, right? Doesn't need negative, more forms, different types of endings, different ways of describing this type of state of element in a verb. What's different? And you should let your students know that this is different and make sure that you provide extra time and opportunity for doing that. Additionally, the meaning of the verb, the copula, is oftentimes vague. You know, when I say he is angry, well, what is? Well, what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily have a lot of meaning attached to it. He is pretty. He is angry. He is not here. He is on his way. You know, is kind of changes its meaning as we go along with these different types of things. That's not to say that it's completely vague, because it does carry some meaning. It carries time, for example. Okay, it can carry aspect. It can describe a relationship with the elements before and after, right? He is hungry is describing some type of a relationship. He is a doctor, right? Again, describing some kind of a relationship between doctor and he. And the link between the two. 2 and 2 is 4, again, would be another type of link. Okay, so it's kind of vague, but it does carry certain types of information, both grammatical and also content. Additionally, it has different jobs, as we mentioned before. It can function as a verb. It can function as an auxiliary, or as an auxiliary. And it doesn't need do. It functions as an auxiliary for things like he is going, right? So I have is and going, and they go together to form what we would call the present progressive. It's not a be verb in that sense now, right? It's not the main verb anymore. It's an auxiliary, and it doesn't need do. Again, as I said, these are going to be difficult for some of your ESL learners. Some people tend to ignore them because they don't understand them. And what Self's Mercy and Larson Freeman point out is that the same is true for a lot of young learners, young native speakers. Things that they don't understand, they tend to omit. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but we do not want them to fossilize at that level. And we want to make sure that they continue to grow in their language learning. Some tend to admit it, or some tend to use the wrong form when they're talking, when they're writing. So you, as language teachers, my thought is it's an excellent opportunity to take advantage of that mistake, to show students what the correct thing is to do, help them master that particular component. I say take advantage of the opportunity, but you should also recognize that you want to try to make sure that you don't discourage them so much that they don't want to continue learning. I don't know if you've ever been in a class where you've been discouraged to do something. You want to encourage your students to try and practice and get involved so that they can learn. The more interaction they have, the more noticing opportunities they'll have, and the better their language should become. All right, so provide opportunities for them, especially with these 2 or 3 primary rules here with regard to the copula and also subject-verb agreement when we get to that one as well. And here we are, subject-verb agreement. Let's look at some of the forms, the meanings, and then some of the issues related to subject-verb agreement. You probably remember subject-verb agreement when you were in grammar school and they were trying to teach you, the third-person singular S here, or the plural noun S, and the difference between the two. But you're going to run into this very much so when you're dealing with young learners of a second language. For example, they may give you the wrong form. Ted live in Chicago instead of Ted lives in Chicago. Or they may try to overgeneralize, right? Third person singular is going to have an S in it. Well, with modals, you don't have any S's. So the doctor cans go is not going to work. It's got to be can go. You're only going to use the third person singular S with a normal verb, or even with the be verb, right? You're going to have that different form. But modals is not going to work. Students may overgeneralize. They may use that same thing over and over again. They may provide the wrong number, okay? Not just the wrong person, but the wrong number. They sings many songs. Well, they is plural, therefore sings should be plural, okay? So they may have a wrong amount. They may overgeneralize. They may omit it altogether. Again, just because they don't understand. Oftentimes when they overgeneralize, it's because they've learned the rule, but they're using it too many times. If they use the wrong amount, sometimes that happens because they're pulling from their own language. Okay, they're pulling an idea from their own language and they put it into English, and it doesn't work. Okay. Another thing that the authors here talk about is word order. And in my opinion, this is very important. Languages that have a specific word order that is SVO, subject, verb, object. The authors here describe them as subject prominent languages. And as such, they're very grammatical. Sequence is important. Years ago, in Middle English and Old English, sequence was less important because they had sentence, parts of speech markers for the parts of speech. And so you could move things around because there was a marker to tell you if it was a subject or if it was an object, and the like. That's not being done today anymore in our languages. We are subject, verb, object. Things like languages like English or Spanish or Arabic have a specific order, a specific sequence. And as such, they have subject-verb agreement, interestingly enough. I am, you are, he is. Subject-verb agreement, and we have that order. Other languages, like Chinese or Korean or Japanese, are topic prominent. The subject is usually not first. The subject is first, but it's usually not required. And they don't have subject-verb agreement. So, for example, in Japanese, if I wanted to say, I like bananas, I would literally say bananas like, or banana like. No S after bananas, and I don't even need a subject. So the point here is because the topic is more prominent, and the subject is more understood through the context, there is no subject-verb agreement. So when I was studying German, I hated subject-verb agreement because there are 36 million cases, the nominative case, the accusative case, the dative case. None of them went to trial, fortunately. But in Japanese, there are no cases because there is no subject-verb agreement. So it was very nice in that sense. No subject-verb agreement. There are other problems, obviously, with that. But my point is, for this particular slide, that word order is going to play a part in how well students grapple with subject-verb agreement. You'll note that people who come to learning English with a topic prominent, right, or a pragmatic type of language, they're going to have more difficulty with subject-verb agreement because it's not something that's in their language. For those who have that in their language, like Spanish, like German, it's going to be easier for them to understand the concept and to learn the rules faster. For them, it's less marked. For topic-prominent languages like Chinese and Korean, it's going to be more marked. It's going to be more difficult for them to understand. Some other problems that students may have with the subject-verb agreement is knowing where to put the S at the end of normal words, right? The plural noun. We put it there as a plural, but sometimes students think if it's a plural noun, then I need a plural verb, and it doesn't work that way, right? So there's a rule, and these are the regular rules for person. Third person singular gets an S. And with the be verb, we have am, are, is, first, second, and third. And with have, we have, has. Additionally, just a note here, if be or have is part of the auxiliary, it is in the auxiliary that they carry number. Okay, so I can say he is angry. Is the verb, and so is carries number, right? He is angry. But if it's he is running, running is the verb, is the auxiliary, but is carries the number. Okay, that's how the book describes it. I don't like the way the book describes it. I would prefer to look at the verb as a set of words. And the first verb, or this first element in the structure, generally will carry number, right? If the verb actually has that in it. So he has time. He has been looking. right? That has both have and be. He has been looking, but has carries the time. The first element always carries the time. The first element always carries the person also, right? Had been looking. Has been looking. Rule number 2. When you have when you're first person singular, you have a plural s. When you have plurals, you have no s, okay? And again, this is where students are going to have difficulty because they're going to say, oh, it's plural here, therefore I want a plural here. Not necessarily the case, right? The boy likes candy, I have an s. The boys like candy, I don't have an s after in the verb. All right, I love this example because it shows just a straight distinction between the two. If it's singular, I have an S. If it's plural, I don't have an S. And your goal as a language teacher is to try to find an example like this one that clearly shows the difference between the two so that your students can get this in their head. But that's going to be a problem that they're going to run into. You're also going to have a problem with something called collective nouns. So, for example, the United States. Do you say the United States is, or do you say the United States are? Most people would probably today say the United States is. But if we used these United States, we would say are. I'm told through a recent movie that before Abraham Lincoln, they would literally say the United States are, because it was a collective. It wasn't until after the Civil War that it changed. Point being, collective nouns can be confusing to people, to students. We have the word population, which would be singular. We have the word rice, which would be singular. But we have the word money, which can be singular, should be singular. But we also have the word monies. Okay, money is supposed to be non-count, but we also have the word monies, which could be plural. So we have a lot of exceptions. A lot of it has to do with the way we perceive of things in our mind. Is the author of a sentence or of a sentence, are they thinking singularly or are they thinking plurally? And if it's legal to do it both ways, then you have to find out what the intent of the author is. There are also some rules that are applied here, not necessarily correctly, but their rules do exist. Let's take a look at some other issues that students may run into. Nouns that look like they're plural, but they're not, right? I can say, for example, use the word here, news. News looks like it's plural, right? The news is, but news looks like it's plural, so you'd say the news are. But news is a word that looks plural, but it's actually a singular noun. Wales, part of England, ends with an S. It looks like it's a plural, but Wales is the name of the place. So Wales is a great place to visit, for example. Wales looks like it's a plural. Measles. Right? Measles is very dangerous for adults. People want to say measles are, but measles is the name of the disease, right? Physics is an interesting thing to study. Physics ends with an S. It looks like a plural, but it's actually a singular. Okay? You're going to have trouble with those. You may have trouble with something that has a singular noun, but it's got a plural preposition. A pair, one pair, which is singular, right? A pair. A pair of pants is in the bathroom. Well, pants of pants is plural, so that looks confusing. These pants, now that's more than one. These pants are too big. A number of books are missing. A number means a few in English. Okay, the number, now they're only talking about one number when you say the number of people is 25. So they're going to have a difficulty with a number and the number, because a number doesn't mean a real literal number. It means a few. And the number is referring to a specific number, right? Another problem, nouns that can be singular or plural or collective. Okay, 2/3, I don't know if it's singular or plural. It'll depend on what comes next. 2/3 of an apple, well, apple is singular. 2/3 of an apple is less than singular, so it's going to be singular. 2/3 of the people is plural. Okay, so I don't know what 2/3 means until I find out 2/3 of what. A lot can mean a variety of things. Okay, depends on what comes after. A lot of time, well, time is singular. A lot of time was wasted. A lot of trees were burned. Trees is plural, therefore a lot in this sense is going to be plural. You see, it's going to depend on what comes after in this case. Some other issues. Before I begin, these two words are very important for you. Prescriptivists and descriptivists. Okay, you've got the prescriptivists who tell you what you should be doing, and you have the descriptivists who explain to you how language is used. I wish I had this comic. It was from BC Comic from years ago. I found it in a linguistics book. It is the picture of a lady bringing a new grammar book to the publisher. And she holds up the book and she says, I have a new grammar book that I would like published. And she's getting ready to hand it over to the publisher. The publisher says, can I see it? And as she hands the book over, she looks at him and she says, may I see it? And the publisher hands her the book back and he says, you can keep it. The reason why this is funny is because she, the woman trying to get her book published, is a prescriptivist. She's going to tell you how to use language. Okay? She's not going to describe how language is used, because in all honesty, can I see it, is a completely legal phrase in English. It's a completely legal sentence. But this woman was trying to enforce her view of language on him. Can I see it is perfectly legal. It actually conveys an idea. It actually conveys an idea that everyone can understand. If I were to say, can I avocado it? Okay, that would not be legal. That would be illegal in English because it does not convey an idea appropriately. People will talk about words like ain't, and they will say ain't a word. And then I would answer to them, it ain't. All right, it isn't. I've conveyed my idea, and it was legal in its construction. So I would say there's nothing wrong with the word ain't. I'm describing how it's used. Okay, I'm describing how language is used. I'm not telling someone what is quote-unquote acceptable or not acceptable. Okay? So in my view, and of course other linguists as well, they want to be descriptivists. They want to describe how language is used, not tell someone how they should pronounce things. You will find in the publication world, you will find people who will say you're not supposed to use he as the generic third person, right? A man walked into a room. Well, a person walked into a room, right? And so you have this person who, likes cherries, and so he goes to the store. Oh no, I can't say he goes to the store. I have to say they go to the store, right? Generic. That's a prescriptivist telling you how to use your language instead of a descriptivist who simply describes how language is used. Now, all that being said, when you're teaching someone to function in a given environment, you should teach them the rules for that environment. So if you're teaching your students how to live in the academy, how to go to college, how to prepare for writing and reading in college, you better teach them the rules for writing and reading in college. So therefore, you should show them that ain't a good word to use when you're writing a paper in college, because those are the rules for living in that environment. The same would be true for going into business. There are rules for writing in business, there's rules for speaking in business, and you should learn and teach what those rules are. That doesn't mean that any other form or fashion of writing or speaking is wrong. It's simply not appropriate for a given situation. Okay? You go down south, you go into some type of music industry where you have to speak a certain way, whether it's in Tennessee or it's in New York City, you're probably gonna have to change the way you speak and or write. None of those are wrong or substandard. Okay, it's just a different environment that you're in. You have to abide by those different surroundings. If you're in a college right now and you're looking at this video and you're writing a paper, it better be APA. You better not use contractions. Those are the rules for living in that environment, okay? That doesn't mean that it's wrong. It only means that there are rules for a particular environment. Okay? Difference between prescriptive and descriptive. All right, back to subject-verb agreement. More. Nouns that can be singular, plural, or collective. All is another word. I don't know what it means. All of the people. People is plural, therefore are. All of the water. Water is non-count, therefore it's going to be is. Okay, your students are going to have trouble with this. Native speakers have trouble with this. So you want to be prepare yourself for teaching students these things. None would be another one. None of the cars are ready. None of the rice is loaded. Okay, again, it could be singular, it could be plural, right? Here's one that we're really going to have trouble with. Each. Each is usually assigned to singular, each one. Okay? So some will say each of the examples was correct. That's probably the prescriptivist way of describing it. But there are many people who would say each of the examples, well, examples is plural, therefore I'm going to use were. Each of the examples were correct. If I'm teaching students this, and my students are going to college, I will probably encourage them to look at the more popular was in this example instead of were. It's interesting when you go and look at the grammar book and look at the little bit of research that they did regarding these words to find out which one was more popular. You'll note that the one that was standardized, in other words, one that your prescriptivist grammar teachers in grammar school taught you, those are the ones that are still more popular, relatively speaking. But there are some who'd use both sides. So words like each is going to be difficult. All and none, they're going to be difficult. Other types of problems your students are going to run into are relative clause antecedents. Okay, just to let you know, for those of you that have been studying the morphology, ante is before. Okay, cedent has to do with something that it's said before. All right, so we have Dave is one of those people who. Okay, who's your relative clause? And the antecedent is people, right? Well, no, maybe it's one. Maybe it's Dave. Which one is it? For the most part, they say, the rules say that it's the one closest to it, right? So I look at this example. Dave is one of those people who have to say the final word. Who has to say the final word? Dave has to say the final word. Dave is one who has to say the final word. Which one is it? You're going to find different arguments for each one of these. I would probably, again being the more conservative, I would probably be using has in this example. Since people is the preposition of and one, it clearly describes one. But you are going to find some people who will say have. Both will be acceptable, descriptive. Both will be acceptable in normal English. Someone might look down on you if you're using were, or if you were using have instead of has. But it's completely explainable. It's completely understandable. You're going to be writing for the APA. You'll want to be more conservative, right? Your ESL students are going to have trouble with this, so you're going to have to spend time working on this with relative clauses and noun clauses. We all know what a noun clause is. It's a clause that takes the place of a noun, right? So here we have going to the movies. That's a noun clause, right? That Tim can speak 4 languages is a noun clause. Okay? Each of these is a noun. And it's in the sentence. Here's the subject. Here's the verb, right? Here's the verb for this one, right? And it's a noun. And these are usually singular, right? Going to the movies. That thing, going to the movies, that is fun, right? Or is not fun in this example. The Tim can speak 4 languages, that thing, right, does not impress me. That's one thing. Your students are going to have problems with things like these, so you'll want to spend extra time to get them to notice these issues with regard to subject-verb agreement. Okay? Last thing that we'll want to talk about are some rules regarding some of the markers that you'll use with the subject-verb agreement. One is the proximity principle. When using either or, neither nor, the noun closest to the verb determines the number. Okay? And I'm certain that you remember this when you were going through grammar school. Either the dog or the in-laws are crying. Here's the verb, are. I've got two. I've got the in-laws or the dog. Okay? Either the in-laws or the dog is crying. Okay? So it's going to change based on the closest noun. Okay? That's what the authors are talking about here. I've also heard some say because it's either or, it's only going to be one. And in this case, one of them is plural, therefore it's plural. In this case, it's singular, and therefore they're going to say it's singular. General rule, right? There are 2 cats and a dog in the house. Are, because we're using 2 cats. But here, there is a dog. And always signifies one. And in this case, it is closest to the verb, therefore. Okay, the proximity principle. I'm certain you learned this when you were growing up in school, but it's something that your students are going to be confused about when they encounter them in the language. So you should learn the rule so that you can teach it to them. The next one is the principle of non-intervention. This is actually a principle that we had prior to the First World War. Yeah, no, we didn't. This is a grammar element here, not a historical one. Non-intervention refers to the prepositions, oftentimes they're prepositions that occur after a noun and before the verb. So they're kind of squished. They're right in the middle. We've got a subject, and then we have a whole bunch of prepositions, and then a verb. And the subject and verb are the ones that are supposed to agree. Everything else in between doesn't matter, right? So, you know, I can say the number that the people and the number that the people counted before, you know, going to the movies is 13. Is going to be there because everything else that goes in between, it's the number. Number is singular, therefore the verb should be singular, right? Example here, the main cause. How many causes? 1. The main cause. 1. Therefore, the verb is going to be singular. The fact that there are millions of stars people see in the sky, none of that has anything to do with the tense of the verb, the aspect of the verb. Right? This goes all the way back to cause. Okay, so it's 1. Something your students are going to need to understand. Okay? And so you want to be extra careful with regard to everything in between, the principle of non-intervention. That's all for this particular chapter. I do hope everything was understandable here. If you do have any questions, please let me know. I'll be glad to talk to you online, and I look forward to seeing more of your work. Talk to you later.